Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Ichigo had date with unohana and harem with other girls part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the freshman 19 for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Let's start this video. Ichigo sat in his room, resting. That's pretty much what he did now a day. The winter war was over and Aizen surrendered after Ichigo, the Soul Society, and the Wizard stopped him from creating the King's Key and trying to take the throne of the Soul King. Even he had to admit it was kind of boring now that nothing was happening. Well, besides the fact that Renji and Rukia finally got together, even Ichigo could see that they were meant for each other. Ichigo was finishing up his homework when he noticed a black butterfly was flying around outside his window. "That's a hell butterfly," he said as he stuck out his hand. "Ichigo Kurosaki." Captain General Yamoto's voice came from the butterfly. "We request your immediate presence in the Soul Society for an emergency meeting. A spirit gate is awaiting you outside Kisuke Urahara's shop. Take it and a guide will escort you to the captain's meeting room." The butterfly flew off Ichigo's finger, having done its job, and Ichigo sighed as he opened a drawer and reached for a small green pill. It was Kan in his original form. Ichigo swallowed the mod soul, forcing his soul out of his body. "Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone, okay, Kan?" Ichigo said, gripping the handle of Zangetsu threateningly. "Yeah, sure. At least you finished your homework before you the switch. Now I can just relax." Kan sighed pleasantly as he pulled a manga magazine from underneath Ichigo's bed and began to read it. Ichigo knew that wouldn't last long, but he was very anxious to know what the Soul Society wanted. After a few flash steps, Ichigo was outside the Urahara Shoten, and outside was the entire Shoten staff was outside. "I see you've been practicing your flash steps, Ichigo. You might even be able to keep up with me one day," Yoruichi said with a wink, teasing the young Soul Reaper. "No, I am not playing tag with you, not after that last game." Ichigo shuddered, remembering the events of his first game of tag with Yoruichi, the goddess of Flash. He pushed those thoughts to the back of his mind as he walked towards the spirit gate, and followed the hell butterfly through it. He still hated the tunnels connecting the two worlds, and remembered almost being killed the first time. The entrance to the Soul Society came into view, the light at the end of the tunnel, literally. Ichigo was already inside the Seriitii when he emerged from the gate, and Rukia was waiting for him. "Ichigo, follow me," she said, her face just as anxious as his was. "Do you know what this meeting is about, Rukia?" Ichigo asked her, only for her to shake her head no. At that point Ichigo began running different scenarios in his head. Did they want him to give up his powers? Were they going to kill him for being a Soul Reaper and a Hollow? Were they going to make him reproduce little wizards to be sued for their own military gain? Wait a minute, he thought. I'm overthinking this. It won't be that bad. They probably just want to thank me for all my help with stopping Aizen and give him some medal of honor. Minutes began to feel like days to Ichigo. Never in his life had he been so nervous. It was almost like he wasn't himself. When they finally reached the captain's meeting room, Rukia stopped about 10 feet short. "The meeting room is inside that door," she said with indifference covering her tone. She looked away from him, with a slight smile appearing on her face. She got rid of it in time before Ichigo saw her face again when he pushed against the gigantic doors. Inside he saw 8 captains waiting for him, headed by the old man. "Welcome, Ichigo Kurosaki. I take it you are wondering why you are here," Yamamoto asked him as he made his way into the room and stood in the middle, with all eyes on him. He could just feel the giant Ryatsu around him, almost suffocating if it weren't for his own massive amount. "You could say that," Ichigo said softly, eyeing everyone in the room until Yamamoto let out a chuckle. "I can see you are trying very hard not to forget to breathe. It's alright if you let your Ryatsu out to feel comfortable," he said. I closed. But Ichigo felt as though he was glaring holes in him. Accepting the invitation, Ichigo let out a little of his own Ryatsu, and just as the old man said, he was a little more comfortable, until he noticed some of the captains grimace slightly. Ichigo then realized he had let some of his hollow Ryatsu loose, and it gave the captains an uneasy feeling. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to let that out," he said, but Yamamoto raised his hand. "It's alright, that is the very thing that we have called you here for, young Kurosaki." Yamamoto started. "The very nature of your powers is akin to that of the Arankar, which you helped us defeat in the Winter War a few weeks ago. We are aware that the original power you received from Rukia Kichiki was stripped of you, and when trying to regain your powers you entered the hollow transformation and regained your powers at the same time. That being the scenario, you are allowed to retain your powers, both as a Hollow and Soul Reaper." Ichigo let out a sigh of relief. At least that one scenario wasn't going to come true where they all beat him into submission and removed his powers. "But in exchange for keeping your powers, you must give up your life as a human and join one of the Godai 13 squads." As soon as Yamamoto finished his statement, Ichigo's eyes widened as much as they could. Are you kidding me, old man? Ichigo growled, the black ryatsu leaking from inside Ichigo. I understand your anger at this situation, but, in all fairness, if you stayed in the real world, and given your lack of ryatsu control, you would undoubtedly grant all of Karakura Town the same power as yourself over time, and I doubt a city full of Soul Reaper and Hollow Hybrids would be very good for the world of the living. With your level of power, on the other hand, you are automatically up for one of the vacant captain spots. You will be able to select seated officers for your squad and pick your own lieutenant. You'll have full control over everyone in your squad. Ichigo let the thought roll over him like a wave in the ocean. Full choice over all 20 seated officers. He realized he had a lot of convincing to do. Alright, I accept. I'll join the Godai 13, he said. And you said I can pick anyone for my squad, right? He asked, receiving a nod from the head captain. Alright, I'll need to return to the world of the living, to say my goodbyes. The gate you used to come here is still active. You may use to say goodbye to those close to you, Yamamoto said as he banged his cane on the ground. We will assign you your squad when you return. You have 24 hours. Ichigo bowed respectfully to the head captain and made his exit with a flash step outside, discovering Rukia with her ear pressed on the doors. What do we have here? Ichigo blurted out, causing Rukia to hit her head on the door and fall on her back. You knew, didn't you? You were just waiting to see my reaction, huh? He said, picking her up by the collar. Well, my big brother might have mentioned it a few days ago, so yes, I knew. Congratulations, I guess. She said somewhat sadly until Ichigo laughed. What are you getting sad about? Because if I'm a captain you can't be around me anymore. Are you worried I might forget you? He teased, sticking his tongue out at her. As if I'd miss you, you rude, arrogant meathead, she said, kicking him in the shins. Why, you midget? He said as he spiked her on the ground like a football, leaving her in a heap on the ground. I guess I should find someone else to make my third seat then. Rukia's head shot up from the ground. Did you say third seat? She looked up at Ichigo with joyful eyes. I've never been up for a seat that high. I would be glad to be your third seat. Hey, wait, why aren't I a lieutenant? Doesn't killing an espada count for anything? You would be, but I have someone special I'd like for my lieutenant, he said, looking off into the sky. Well, I need to go back home and say goodbye to everyone. You want to tag along third seat? He asked as he started walking back the way they came earlier. Ichigo, about the third seat my brother will never let me accept. He made a promise to my sister on her deathbed that he'd protect me at all costs, and there's a lot of danger involved in being a third seat. Rukia's eyes fell to her feet, just imagining Byakuya's reaction to her being promoted to a third seat. It was filled with cherry blossom petals flying all across the Tsurugi. Please, Ichigo said, his tone bathed in defiance. If he says no, I'll beat him down until I hear a yes, he said, throwing punches at the air to further make his point, leaving Rukia only to laugh at his brash, yet slightly arrogant, statement. They reached the gate and went through like usual and re-emerged outside the Urahara shop. So Ichigo, how'd business in the Soul Society turn out? Urahara asked, waving his fan in front of his face, acting as if he didn't already know, and received an elbow to the face. Aggressive as always, Ichigo said, rubbing the blood away from his nose. I take it you accepted their offer for captaincy. Since you will no longer be living amongst, well, the living. Sure, you can preserve my body in case I want to come visit anyone, Ichigo said, taking Urahara's hint. The shopkeeper rejoiced, saying something about a new invention that needed to be tested, but Ichigo had already left earshot to get down to what he wanted to do. Recruit. Shinji, get your lazy ass up and get us lunch, Hiyori said as she dug around in her ear with her pinky. Now, is there any way to talk to the man who saved you twice now? First when we got out of Hollow Powers and in the war against Aizen? Shinji asked, and he was right. He took an enhanced zero from the first, second, and third espadas that was aimed at Hiyori. I didn't ask for your help, head. Now get me some lunch. She aimed a sandal at Shinji, but he ducked. Ever since the war he always knew when to anticipate her strikes, virtually ending the abuse she gave him. As Hiyori continued to swipe at Shinji, a huge ryatsu fell upon the wizard's hideout, weighing them down. That feels like what Ichigo, Lisa said as Ichigo's presence made her drop her magazine. Sure enough, to her guess, Ichigo came down the steps. The wizards were still recovering from their injuries from the final battles. Kensei was nursing shoulder injuries on both arms, after facing down his former squad member Tozen, both of whom were unconscious after the battle. But it was Tozen who, when it looked like all was lost for the Soul Society, activated his Bankai and gave his Zanpakuto to Ichigo so that he could navigate the dark hell. Lisa was the one who took the least amount of damage, because she and Shunsui hadn't fallen out of sync after the hundreds of years, and they defeated Stark and Lilinet with ease. They all looked at Ichigo like they were welcoming home a hero. They were saved from hiding from the Soul Society and were granted freedom from the crimes of obtaining hollow powers. Hey guys, it's been a while, he said as they all gathered around him. What brings you back badly? Hiyori asked as she smacked Ichigo with her sandal. At least she could hit him. Ouch, damn it, well, I'll get to the point. I'm going to live in the Soul Society from now on, and I want you guys to be in my squad when I become captain. You want us to what? Hiyori yelled, swinging her sandal wildly, everyone in the area ducking for their lives. Me be an underling to you, you're out of your damn mind, Baldy. Love and Rose did their best to hold Hiyori back from attacking Ichigo. Ichigo, you've got to understand, we were happy in Soul Society, but we can't go back there. We've grown together as a family, and we don't want the Soul Society to break up. Shinji said, I'm sorry, but we just can't. And plus, I was a captain, so it's not like there are enough sports for us to be in our old positions. Shinji said with a sigh. You just killed the guys who took your old spots, you idiot, so you could. Ichigo spat back at Shinji, throwing him for a loop. Damn it, you ruined my cool moment. Happy now? Shinji yelled frantically. But Ichigo could only laugh. I'll keep some spots open for you guys, see you around, I've got goodbyes to say. Ichigo turned to walk up the stairs until his ears picked up a very familiar sound. After a few seconds, he remembered the source of it. Ichigo. Ichigo felt his feet leave the ground and a squishy feeling on his back as Neilio tackled him to the ground. She had finally found a way to remain in her adult form when Pressure and Dandan Shaka used the last of the Ryatsu to complete her mask. Did you say you needed members for a squad called Ichigo? Ichigo had forgotten that she decided to live with the Vizards after the war was over, and she would follow him. Ichigo muttered, his face in the dirt under Neilio until she turned him over to let him breathe. You want to be in my squad, Nell? She responded with a vigorous nod, a smile covering her face. I want to follow Ichigo wherever he goes. She hugged him in the tightest grip she could manage, nearly suffocating Ichigo. That's great, Ichigo gasped until she let go of him. Okay, let's go then, we've got other people to meet up with. Ichigo dusted himself off and he and Nell went to their next destination, Ichigo's house. Ichigo jumped to his open window and re-entered his room, followed closely by Neilio. Much to Ichigo's surprise, Khan was still reading manga when he returned. You're still here? Wait, did you leave and then come back once you felt my Ryatsu, Khan? Ichigo asked angrily, knowing what Khan could do with his powerful legs. Are you kidding? There's nothing to do around here now that you've ended all the fighting, and I can't even sense Ryatsu. Just goes to show how much I'm trusted around here. Humph. Khan was on one of his self-pity monologues, and Ichigo ended it by punching the mod soul pill out of his stomach and re-entered his human body. For the last time. Hey guys? Ichigo was shocked to leave his room and find his entire family outside waiting for him with tears in their eyes. We've heard the news, big brother, sobbed Yuzu. The government picked you as their next super spy, and you have to live at their headquarters from now on. She hugged her brother tightly. Rukia, Ichigo thought he'd sent her to tell everyone a cover story. Will you promise to come and visit us? Ichigo, Karen asked. Ichigo was surprised that she of all people was crying. He even wondered if she was faking it, but decided it was best to not ask questions and complicate things. I'm so proud of you, my son, you've grown into a secret agent. Masaki, I've done well. Isshin shouted at the top of his lungs, completing the group hug on Ichigo, who was glaring daggers back at Nell so she wouldn't add to it. After a few minutes the hug was broken as Karen comforted Yuzu downstairs, leaving Ichigo and Isshin alone. So, how'd you find out about? Please, do you think I wouldn't know that my son is a captain-level Shinigami with hollow powers and that he was the hero of the Great Winter War that saved not only Karakura Town, but the Soul Society as well, and that he's going to be one of the next captains in the Godai 13? Isshin smirked at Ichigo, who just smiled back. He thought he dreamt of his father helping him out before he fought Aizen, but it was true. Thanks, Dad. Oh, and to make sure Mr. Urahara doesn't mess up my body too badly, he laughed as, for the first time since his mother's death, he opened his arms to hug his father. Ah, son, Isshin laughed as he hugged Ichigo. But you'll never be a good captain if you're too soft. And he smacked Ichigo on the top of his head. You jerk, I'll miss you, Dad. Ichigo decided not to retaliate just this once. The rest of the day was filled with classmates coming by his house. Apparently Rukia had been spreading the story around and everyone heard about it, even his teacher. One of the last people to come over was Orihime. Hey Ichigo, I hear you're leaving to become a captain in the Soul Society. Great job, she said, rubbing the back of her head. Thanks, Orihime. You seem to be taking it well, he said awkwardly. After the war was over, Orihime finally told Ichigo how she felt about him, and they started a relationship shortly thereafter. Well, it's okay, Ichigo. I heard from Rukia that they would seal your powers away if you didn't accept, and I'm glad you're happy. Tears began to fall down her face. I'll miss you, Ichigo. Ichigo hugged her as she cried. Ichigo knew this would be the hardest goodbye he'd have to say, since he couldn't take Orihime with him to Soul Society, because she didn't have a Zanpakuto yet. I'll be sure to visit every now and then, so don't miss me too much. Ichigo jokes, getting a small giggle in response from Orihime. Orihime spent the night over Ichigo's house that night, reminiscing about their experiences over the past year, from invading the Soul Society to her abduction to Hueco Mundo. Ichigo and Orihime fell asleep in each other's arms that night, in a storybook couple ending. The next thing Ichigo remembered, the sun was shining in on him through his window. Orihime had woken up before him, and even made him an odd-looking breakfast. Ichigo gave her the benefit of the doubt, and ate it. It actually wasn't that bad compared to some of the foods she mixed together. They walked together to the Urahara Shoten so that Ichigo could leave the world of the living for the last time. I can't believe I'm getting my own squad. I bet Kenpachi will want to fight to the death every day just great, Ichigo said as they drew nearer to the shop where the gate would pick him up. Ichigo, you can take him, and if not I can stop by and erase him like I did the King's Key. Orihime did some over-exaggerated hand motions showing how Kenpachi would react to being erased. Once they finally arrived, Ichigo saw that Urahara was there waiting for him, along with Yoruichi. Hey guys, thanks for coming to see me off. It means a lot, he said with a small smile on his face. It's time, Ichigo, Rukia said, coming out of the shop in her Soul Reaper form with Nilil in tow. Yeah, Ichigo reached into his pocket, and pulled his badge out, and pushed his soul from his body, which fell right into the waiting hands of Kisuke. I'll come and visit you sometime, kiddo, Yoruichi said with another wink, causing Ichigo to blush and grunt under his breath. Tell everyone I'll miss them and visit soon. But I'll miss you most of all, Orihime, Ichigo said somberly. Well, I'd better get going. See you later, Orihime nodded with tears in her eyes. Ichigo turned to the gate, Rukia and Nell at his side, and they entered the gate. Ichigo, I know that was hard for you and Orihime just getting into your relationship and all, Rukia said awkwardly, trying her best to comfort her soon-to-be captain. It's okay, Rukia, she's strong. I'll have to get over her, but I have my duties as a captain to look forward to. Plus I'm the same rank as Byakuya. Now I can bug the hell out of him, Ichigo laughed evilly. Ichigo, being a captain isn't just about fighting, you know. There's leadership and most of all paperwork, which you may have a lot of, Rukia said firmly, trying to see if she got to Ichigo with that statement. Please, that's what my third seat is for. Ichigo took off in a sprint, closely followed by Nilil. Ichi, why I'm in the third seat? You get back here! Ichigo and Nell emerged from the spirit gate first, followed by Rukia, who was breathing heavily from being outrun. When they emerged, Ichigo noticed that someone was waiting for him. They were medium height, a little taller than Rukia and Nell, and they were wearing the haori of a captain. I've been waiting for you, Captain Kurosaki. It was Captain Unohana awaiting the new Captain Zariva. You have? May I ask who you are, Captain? Ichigo asked, a confused look on his face. I'm not surprised you don't know me. I am Retsu Unohana, Captain of the 4th Squad, which specializes in healing and medicine. Since you are new, you need to pass a physical for your captaincy to be official. Oh, and you'll need this too. She reached into her haori and pulled out a folded haori with the 5th Squad's emblem on it. Oh, thank you, Captain Unohana. Ichigo took the haori and unfolded it. A smile came across his face as he put his arms in the sleeves. He noticed that it was soft, and must have been tailor-made for him, since Aizen was the last one to be captain of the 5th Squad. Now that you have that, it's time for your physical. Follow me please, Unohana requested as she began to make her way back to the 4th Squad's office. I'll catch up with you guys later. Rukia, can you take Nell to the 5th Squad's barracks and show her around? Ichigo asked as he followed Unohana. Sure thing. I just hope she can give you some medicine for those cooties you have, Rukia said slyly over to Ichigo, who clenched his fists and yelled something back at her, but Rukia was already running off with Nell to the 5th Squad. That damn midget, Ichigo growled under his breath. It seems you and Ms. Kuchiki have an interesting relationship, Unohana said nonchalantly. Ichigo jumped at the word relationship. No, you have it all wrong. Rukia's like family to me. My dad even calls her his third daughter, Ichigo jokes. This was the first time he'd gotten a good look at Captain Unohana and took her appearance in. She appeared a kind and caring person, befitting of a woman who was an expert healer. He noticed that her hair was braided, and it went over her neck and draped down her over. Ichigo was so busy thinking about her, and he didn't notice that she stopped and he bumped into her. I'm sorry, I was lost in thought. Huh? Ichigo looked to see what they had stopped to see, and it looked as though a young woman and a man were having an argument. I'm sorry, but there's nothing else I can do to your shoulder that wouldn't end up re-injuring it. The woman said she was a little on the tall side and had grayish-blue hair with a few strands hanging down with beads at the end. The man, on the other hand, had his sword drawn and was wincing in pain every few seconds. Please return to your bed and rest, the woman insisted, but the man pointed and waved his sword at her. Hey you, leave the girl alone, Ichigo said, stepping forward to confront the man. Let me handle this. Captain Kurosaki Unohana stepped in front of Ichigo and approached the incident. Excuse me, sir, but I kindly ask you to stop yelling at my lieutenant and return to your rest. She placed a hand on the man's shoulder and smiled at him. Ichigo was utterly confused. Why wasn't she yelling or subduing the man? Ichigo soon saw why. All she did was smile. Yes man, I'll go back to my rest. Resting is the best thing for me. Yes ma'am. The man seemed to sprint back inside to what Ichigo assumed was a bed. Even though she wasn't facing him, he could feel the intimidation that Captain Unohana placed on the man, and it honestly scared Ichigo a little. Right this way, Captain Kurosaki. The intimidation Ichigo felt just seconds ago was now gone when she turned to him with the same smile she gave the man that was arguing with her. Lieutenant. Ichigo simply nodded and walked into the building. Everyone inside began to whisper and point at Ichigo as he walked further into the building behind Unohana. He figured that since it was the infirmary that he had sent his fair share of soul reapers here when they invaded not just 6 months ago. The whispering continued until they reached an open door, and Unohana motioned Ichigo inside and closed the door softly behind them. The room looked like one of the rooms back at his house that was used for the clinic his father ran back in the world of the living. Please remove your clothing and have a seat on the examining chair. Remove what? Unohana's order caught Ichigo off guard, but made her giggle just a little. I was forewarned by Miss Shihoin that you would react that way. She also said that you were shy around beautiful women. Unohana removed her Captain Haori and placed it on a coat rack beside the counter where she picked up a clipboard. Yorichi, you'll pay for this, Ichigo thought as he removed his Captain's Haori and the top half of his regular robes and placed them on a hook beside the full-body mirror and sat on the elevated chair. You're not done yet. Captain Kurosaki Unohana nodded towards Ichigo's legs and his face immediately flushed a deep red. He sighed as he undid the belt and removed his pants, leaving him in a pair of strawberry decaled boxer shorts. Please don't tell anyone about this, he smiled sheepishly towards her in slight embarrassment, and Unohana couldn't help but smile at the young captain. Your secret is safe with me. Now let's begin your physical. Unohana stepped over to Ichigo and placed a hand on him. Now I want you to breathe deeply. In now out, breathe in now out. The physical was going well. Ichigo wasn't afraid of needles. Hell, getting cut up for a week on end and fighting a hollow inside you was scary. But a needle, please. Everything went off without a hitch until, the last thing I need to do is to check for testicular cancer, and we'll be done. Unohana said with some finality in her voice. Check for what now? Ichigo froze. That meant she'd have to see what he had down there. Right now, fighting Arankar and stopping an evil plot didn't seem too bad right now. Is something wrong, Captain Kurosaki? Unohana bent down to look him in the eyes when he started visibly shaking. To check that you have to touch. He couldn't bear to finish his sentence. He almost looked as white as Kuratsuchi did when he stayed in his laboratory too long. Yes, I will have to touch your genitals to check. It will be over in an instant, I promise. And before he knew it, Ichigo felt her hand snake into his underwear. Oh my, she thought. Just then the door opened. I heard Ichigo was in here. Where is that little what the hell? Kenpachi's eyes widened and he even undid the eye patch so he could get a better look. Kenpachi? Ichigo shouted as he fell backwards off the chair. You can't just come barging into any room when you feel like it. Sorry, I'll let you get back to what you were doing. Kenpachi couldn't help but snicker at what he was witnessing. Ichi's getting laid, Ichi's getting laid. Yuichiro blurted out as she got onto Kenpachi's shoulder to see. I am not, now get the hell out. Ichigo shot up and pushed Kenpachi and Yuichiro to the door. Nice undies, Ichi! Yuichiro yelled before Ichigo slammed the door shut. Man, Kenpachi can be frustrating, he thought as he turned back to Unohana, who seemed a bit different. That was very unexpected, she said softly, placing a hand on her face in shock. I hope he didn't take that the wrong way. What do you mean take it the wrong way? You mean Kenpachi likes you? Ichigo asked and Unohana nodded in response. Kenpachi Zaraki, bloodthirsty captain of Squad 11, has a crush on you? Ichigo started laughing hysterically at the fact that someone like Kenpachi could ever have a crush. But Unohana looked to the floor. Yes, it caught me by surprise as well, but I had to decline when he asked me out. She mused as she stared into space. Yikes, I'm surprised you're still alive. I'd hate to piss him off. Kenpachi was well known for being volatile. Just hearing Ichigo's name, so Ichigo shuddered at the thought of his anger at being rejected. No, he was shockingly polite about it, and just walked away and didn't mention it since then. It's amazing what love can do to a person. Well, you do not have any forms of cancer in your body, and your physical is done, you are free to go. She smiled at him as she filled out the rest of the checklist on the clipboard. Ichigo got dressed quickly and walked out of the 4th Division's office and made his way back to his own barracks to get situated on his first day as captain. Captain Unohana, have you finished Captain Kurosaki's physical already? Isane asked, entering the room. Yes, it went off without a hitch until Kenpachi showed up, right in the middle of the testicular cancer check. He has impeccable timing, she said, handing Isane the checklist to be entered in the files. But Captain, that isn't a part of a normal physical, she said, reading the checklist, and a small smirk crept across Retsu Unohana's face. Yes, Isane, I'm aware that. She pulled her Haori off the rack and quietly strolled out of the office to start her check on the rest of the patients. Captain, the next few days seemed like hell to Ichigo. Each hour was filled with a different stack of paperwork. Even with Nell and Rukia helping, it was starting to get to be too much. Once they finally finished, there was the matter of introducing Nell to the other captains and lieutenants at the meeting the next day, and the fact that at the meeting, he and Rukia were going to tell Byakuya that she was being promoted to 3rd seat of the 5th division. It was all scheduled for the meeting tomorrow, Ichigo's first captain's meeting. We finished, Ichigo. Nell cheered as she hopped up and down by the stack of finished papers, the last of the pre-Kurosaki era in the 5th division. The sun had set hours ago, and everyone but Ichigo and Nell had gone to sleep in the barracks. We can now play, Ichigo. Nell pulled Ichigo out of the office and around the 5th division area. Infinite tag, use it, Ichigo. Nell shouted as she sprinted away from Ichigo, who was in no mood to run long distances, but he jogged after her nonetheless. After about 10 minutes she'd officially left Ichigo behind and he couldn't even tell where she was anymore. Nell, where'd you run off to? He called into the night, walking around a few corners, half expecting her to jump out and tackle him. He continued to call for her but to no avail. Good evening, Captain Kurosaki, a soft, familiar voice called to Ichigo. He turned to see Captain Unohana. She must have been on a midnight stroll through the Sereidii. Hello, Captain Unohana, nice night, huh? He said, trying to match her respectful salutation. What brings you outside this late at night? She asked him, and Ichigo let out a soft chuckle. Playing a game of infinite tag with my lieutenant. She always gets too far to look for, and then I never find her. It sounds as though you were playing with little Yuichiro. She can be very evasive. She remembered how Yuichiro continued to evade Byakuya Kachiki's security and sneak in and out of his mansion. Nah, she's a bit bigger than she is. What brings you outside this late? Ichigo looked away inconspicuously. I take regular weekly nighttime strolls. It's very soothing to be out in the cool night, listening to just the sounds of nature. If you don't mind me saying this, but you are a very interesting person, Ichigo. Unohana ran her hands up and down her braid lightly as she awaited Ichigo's response. You think I'm interesting? How so? Although the statement caught him off guard, Ichigo really wanted to know how interesting he was interesting. Well, you began to intrigue me when you and your friends infiltrated the Sereidii last year. It was as if you fought your way through high-level Soul Reapers on pure desire, defeating rank after rank until you defeated both Captain Zaraki and Captain Kachiki, the latter in a most impressive fashion. You willed your way past opponents of greater strength and skill, and your desire made up for your lack in experience. Your daring rescue of Miss Kachiki was simply awe-inspiring. Unohana began to move closer and closer to Ichigo, as she spoke until she was within his personal space when she finished. Retsu, I don't know what to say. He hadn't been this nervous since the first time he played tag with Yorichi in Urahara's training area. You don't have to say anything, but I really should continue my walk. My lieutenant tends to have nightmares at this time of night. I really must see if she's okay. I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow. Captain Unohana continued on her walk and Ichigo watched her until she was out of sight. Did I just get hit on? Ichigo ran the events that just transpired over in his head again. Captain, it happened again. This time it was eggplants fighting strawberries in an epic duel for top food. Isane waited for Unohana's return after her nightmare, just as she did every night. Her captain always seemed to soothe her nerves after her nightmares, and she would easily fall back to sleep. I adore strawberries. Tell me, Insane, did the strawberries win? Unohana mused as her thoughts moved to Ichigo again. Yes, they did, Captain. They met Ichigo with a loud clang and a lack of air. His eyes popped open to see a mass of green hair obscuring his vision. He also felt weighed down, and being semi-conscious didn't help it. Nell let out a soft moan as Ichigo rolled over under her, putting her into a deeper sleep. Only when Ichigo successfully rolled her off of him did she start to stir. Ichigo, you're awake, Ichigo. She pulled him into the first bear hug of the day. After a few minutes she released him to let him gasp for air, and they both slowly made it to their feet. Nell, never sleep on top of me again. Ichigo dusted himself off and put on his captain's haori. Today was the day Ichigo attended his first captain's meeting. He was told to bring his lieutenant, as were the other captains, so no doubt mostly everyone he knew in Soul Society would be there. Ichigo and Nell set off nearly an hour later when Rukia finally showed up to the office. Well, this meeting might get ugly, Rukia. Are you sure you want to come? Ichigo asked her about the 20th time during the walk to the meeting. Yes. For the last time, yes. I can speak for myself, you know. Let's hurry up. We're probably going to be late. Rukia started pushing Ichigo faster. Okay, fine. Ichigo's side stepped away from Rukia and continued to walk to the meeting. When they got there, Ichigo took a deep breath, and then pushed the big door open, then creaked as he pushed harder until all the other captains were in view, along with their lieutenants. Ichigo's first glances were at Byakuya and Renji, whose eyes widened with shock when they saw Rukia behind Ichigo. His second glances were towards all the other captains, when they saw Nilio, an Arankar standing at his side. His eyes caught a few of them reaching towards their zanpakutos. Stand down, all of you. Yamamoto's stern voice carried through the room and halted every action at once. Captain Kurosaki, I can only presume that this Arankar is Nilio to Oderschwank, the former third Espada. Is she one of your seated officers? Yes, I have chosen her for my lieutenant, and I have chosen Rukia Kichiki as my third seat. Whispers began to fill the room when Ichigo finished, until Byakuya stepped forward, his eyes closed, but everyone could feel the silent anger emanating from him. I forbid this promotion. As head of the Kichiki family, Rukia is not ready for the responsibilities, or the danger that comes with being a third seat. When his eyes opened, his glare met the eyes of Ichigo. I'm sorry, new captain, but you will have to find someone else to fill that seat in your squad. And the non-violent battle was on. I was told I could pick anyone from my squad's officers and I chose Rukia. Ichigo spat back. If the Kichiki family is so great, you should be happy that Rukia Kichiki is becoming a third seat from being unranked. A few ohs filled the room as the heads turned back to Byakuya. Watch what you say, boy. Don't take your new position to mean that you can disrespect the head of one of the four noble families in the Soul Society. Byakuya's glare intensified. Rukia is forbidden from becoming your third seat. I won't say it again. But brother, I want. Rukia was drowned out by the Ryatsu coming from Byakuya. He'd said his final words and the Ryatsu caused Rukia to fall to her knees. Byakuya! Ichigo roared angrily as he let loose his own Ryatsu to protect Rukia. Both of you settle down. Yamamoto's Ryatsu was now filling the room, and weighing everyone down. Now, Captain Kurosaki, as head of the Kichiki family, he does have some say in where Rukia is placed, and without the support of two other captains, I'm afraid you can't make her your third seat. Do we have any who support the move? A few long, silent moments passed before Captain Yukitake raised his hand. As her current captain, I know she will do fine as a third seat. I support this promotion. Yukitake gave a soft smile towards both Ichigo and Byakuya. Do we have a third? Another long pause passed, until the silence broke again. I'll support this promotion, Unohana said as she stepped forward. I believe she'll do great work, especially since she defeated an Espada on her own in the war. Byakuya looked at her incredulously as she smiled at him, then he closed his eyes and stepped back, stinging from being overruled. It is settled, Rukia Kichiki is now the third seat of the 5th Division. In the same matter, Nilio to Oderschwank is now the lieutenant of the 5th Division. Captain Kurosaki, you still have seats to fill, Yamamoto said, and he was right. He'd filled some of the lower spots, 12 to 20. I think those spots were reserved for us. Everyone's attention was turned to the now opening doors of the meeting hall. When they stopped, everyone's eyes widened to see that the wizards were standing there. Shinji Hirako, Yamamoto said incredulously, what brings you back to Soul Society? Well, we figured we'd just be bored the rest of our lives. Then Ichigo popped in and offered us some officer seats, and we thought we'd turn his division into the Wizard Division. You sure do know when to make an entrance in Shinji. So are they old men? Ichigo and the others turned to the head captain, who had a rare smile on his face. We're not on your side, we're against Aizen, and we're on Ichigo's side. Yamamoto remembered when the wizards showed up to fight Aizen in the Winter War, feeling some relief in the fact that some of his best captains and lieutenants wanted to return to the Soul Society. Very well, Shinji Hirako, Hiyori Saragaki, Love Aikawa, Lisa Yadamaru, Rojuro Odoribashi, Mishiro Kuna, Kensei Mugirima, and Hachigen Ashoda are reinstated into the Soul Society in the 5th Division under Captain Kurosaki. Yamamoto tapped his cane on the floor, adjourning the meeting. Awesome! Ichigo exclaimed, pumping his fist into the air. My Captain Kurosaki, Captain Unohana said as she approached Ichigo with insane in tow. Your first day as captain, and you've already made a splash. She then turned to the wizards. It is nice to see all of you back in the Soul Society. It's nice to see you too, Retsu. It's been a century. You haven't changed a bit. Shinji obviously hadn't missed a beat as he grabbed Unohana's left hand and planted a soft on it. Ichigo forgot how Shinji was around women, and his eyes traveled over to Unohana's tall lieutenant. Excuse me, but have we met before? Ichigo asked her, and she jumped slightly. Only once. When you saved Rukia at the Sokaika Hill, you punched me in my face and knocked me out. She looked down to the side and twirled her foot around. Oh well, I'm sorry about that. I was just trying to save Rukia. Speaking of Rukia, where did she run off to? He scanned the rest of the room and saw that she was on the other side of the room with Renji standing between her and Byakuya, who has his back turned to her. Big brother, you have to understand, this is what I want, why can't you be happy for me? Rukia's eyes were filled with tears at how her brother was treating her. She thought that after the Winter War, he had more faith in her abilities. Byakuya remained silent with his back still facing her. I can't believe you. You're so selfish, you're not protecting me, you're babying me. And well, I can protect myself, you know. Byakuya remained with his back towards Rukia, and his silence seemed to be driving daggers into Rukia, whose anger continued to grow. Rukia, I think he has his reasons. Renji tried to calm her down, but to no avail. Ichigo could feel Rukia's ryatsu increase for the first time since they fought in Hueco Mundo. He didn't like it at all. Byakuya, why are you so deadest in holding Rukia back? Ichigo called to him, you should be proud. She is not ready, Byakuya said, and began to walk out of the meeting hall. Come Renji. Byakuya exited the meeting room, and after a few moments Renji followed him as ordered. I see Byakuya's overprotectiveness just got the better of him. Retsu chimed in from behind Ichigo. Even though she's his sister, Byakuya sees her like a daughter. You must know a lot about him then, Miss Unohana. Ichigo turned his head to her, seeing her usual smile. Oh yes, I do know a lot about him. I was a captain when he became a Soul Reaper. He was very upset with being the only non-seated Soul Reaper who could do a flash step. When he finally got a seat, he was a 10th seat in the 6th division, while his grandfather was the captain. It seems holding back one's relatives until they are proven in the eyes of the head runs in the family. Retsu thought back to an argument Byakuya had with his grandfather after a mission went awry and ended in Byakuya being hurt. But grandfather, I completed the mission, can't you be happy? A young Byakuya shouted from his bed in the 4th division. When they completed the mission, the Minos he and a small squad were sent to slay had injured him badly with a Zero Blast. Because if you were ready for a promotion, you would have come back unscathed. But here you are in a hospital bed. I'm sorry, but that is my final decision. So how did Byakuya earn his grandfather's blessing? Ichigo was actually shocked that Byakuya was in the same position Rukia was in. How else? He challenged his grandfather to a duel. Unohana replied, her smile fading a bit. He had just mastered his Shurikai, but I'm afraid to say he was soundly beaten once Genrei unleashed his Bankai. The memories of Byakuya's great pain made Unohana hang her head a bit. Wow, I never knew. Ichigo sighed, but that doesn't make it right for him to do that to Rukia. Standing just outside the doors was Rukia. She overheard everything, and a small smile grew over her face. With the meeting still fresh in everyone's minds, the entire Soul Society was talking about the new captain of the 5th division, Ichigo Kurosaki. What was being talked about even more was that Rukia had been promoted all the way to 3rd seat. Ichigo, I've got some papers to run over to the 6th division, I'll be right back. Rukia snatched the papers from the desk and sprinted out of the office, leaving a gust of wind in her tracks. Byakuya was doing what he did on most days, calmly signing paperwork. He just finished his first stack and looked up to make sure his subordinates, and in the flash of an eye Rukia appeared. Big brother, in light of your reaction to my promotion to 3rd seat, I am challenging you to a duel in 5th division training ground in 2 days at noon. Good day to you. And she slammed the papers onto his desk and Flash stepped away. What were you thinking? Renji shouted at Rukia's back as she made her rounds that night after challenging her brother to a duel. You do realize you just challenged one of the most powerful captains in the Soul Society to a duel. I've fought him before, and he's no pushover. His words fell on her deaf ears as she continued her patrol. Rukia! Ichigo's voice filled the corridor that she and Renji were in as he approached. What's this I hear about you challenging Byakuya? His eyes were soft compared to how they usually were, and this infuriated Rukia even more. I know that look you have, Ichigo. She pointed an accusing finger at him. I'm glad to know that you two have no faith in my abilities. Even though I defeated in Espada and helped you guys in the war, you still see me as someone who needs constant protection. The way you're reacting is basically why I'm challenging him. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a patrol to finish. She tried to push Ichigo out of her path, but to no avail. She shot him a glare of pure anger as she continued to attempt to move him. Rukia, I know you're strong, you've proven that to me over and over again. I just wanted you to know that I'm in your corner, and that I believe in you. Ichigo placed both hands on her shoulders. You go to bed, I'll do the rest of the patrol for you. Rukia's face seemed to relax after what Ichigo said to her. She looked him in the eyes again, and then began the walk back to the barracks. Some boyfriend you turned out to be. Ichigo shot at Renji before he took the patrol path Rukia was assigned to. Renji mumbled something under his breath, and then walked back to the 6th Division. The night was a cool one, filled with the occasional breeze and clouds. Ichigo preferred the night in the Soul Society, since it never rained. He hated the rain because it reminded him of when the Grand Fisher killed his mother when he was 9. He was snapped out of his trance by the sound of footsteps coming towards him. He turned around to see Isane walking towards him. Hey Isane, I didn't know you did patrols here too, he said until her hand caught his eye. There was a letter in it. This is for you, Captain Kurosaki. Isane extended her hand with the letter in it towards Ichigo. He took it, and noticed his name in very stylish handwriting on the front of it. He opened the letter. Dear Ichigo, a few of the other captains and lieutenants are playing our monthly game of Truth or Dare. You know that game from the world of the living, and I was wondering if you would like to join us. Sincerely, Retsu Unohana. Truth or Dare? Ichigo read the letter all over again several times and looked up at Isane. His face began to turn a light shade of red as he swallowed. It couldn't be as bad as tag with Yorichi. All right, I'll play, he said as he folded the letter up and put it in his pocket. I've been instructed to escort you to the game if you accepted. Follow me. Isane turned and began to walk towards their destination. Ichigo followed close behind Isane, still getting used to the way the Soul Society was mapped out. After about 5 minutes they reached the doors of the 8th Division's office. The game is inside, Captain. I hope you enjoy yourself. Isane bowed to Ichigo and took off running back to the 4th Division. Ichigo took a deep breath and pushed open the door. All the heads inside turned to look at him. Ichigo looked back into the faces of Shunsui Kairaku, Joshiro Yukitake, Byakuya Kichiki, Lisa Yadamaru, Toshiro Hitsugaya, Soifun, Ranjika Matsumoto, Nimu Kuratsuchi, Nanao Ic and Yorichi? Ichigo shouted in shock, pointing at the workcat. Hey Ichigo! She waved back at him. I decided to stop by to see Soifun, and then she invited me to the game. Come on and play. She stepped over to Ichigo, and pulled him over to where everyone was sitting. Okay, so whose turn is it now that Ichigo's here? Yorichi asked with a big smile on her face. I believe it was Toshiro's turn, Kairaku chimed in, pointing the second youngest captain next to Ichigo. Okay, Soifun, Truth or Dare? Toshiro turned to the 2nd Division captain. I choose Dare, she said with a devious smile on her face. Alright, I dare you to make out with Shunsui for 15 seconds. He grinned back at her as a look of horror was painted on her face. But he reeks of sake and I hate sake. She pleaded as Yorichi pushed her towards Shunsui, who was already puckering up. Damn you, Tosh! Her protests here stopped by her meeting Kairaku's. For 15 agonizing seconds they stayed connected, and after the 15th Soifun gasped for air with a look of violation on her face. You're a better than I thought, Soifun, Kairaku said with a chuckle, and she shot him the most malicious glare she could muster. It's your turn, Soifun. Choose a player. Yorichi announced as Soifun crawled back to her seat. Alright, Matsumoto, Truth or Dare? Soifun turned to the lieutenant of the 10th Division. You know I'm in for Dare. Bring it on. Ranjika pumped her fist in the air ready for anything. Okay then, I dare you to give Kurosaki a lap dance. She smirked as she said the dare, and all eyes went from Ranjika to Ichigo, who was now living up to his strawberry name with the shade of red he was turning. It got worse as Matsumoto approached him. Her eyes narrowed seductively. She placed a hand on his left leg and spun towards the others. How long, Soy? She asked as all eyes turned to the darer. 30 seconds start now. Ranjika sat down and started grinding her hips on the new captain's lap. A few captains started cheering, and after a few seconds nearly everyone was, all except for a certain captain with braided hair. Ichigo was frozen in his chair with Ranjika grinding on him, but that didn't stop it from feeling good. The 30 seconds seemed to take an eternity to pass, much to the delight of Ichigo. I can tell he likes it, Ranjika thought as she felt something poke her butt. She reached back and ran her hands through his orange hair, giving him another seductive look. Time! Soifun called out to end the dare. Ranjika got up from the lap dance and went back to her seat, but not before winking at Ichigo. It's your turn, Ranjika. Alright, Unohana, Truth or Dare? Everyone looked over to Unohana. I'll pick Truth, she said calmly, shooting a quick gaze over to Ichigo, then back to Ranjika. Alright, Captain, do you have a crush on anyone in here? Everyone focused their eyes on Unohana, who still looked as calm as usual. Yes, I do, she said, and smiled at everyone as a few ohs and whistles filled the room. How romantic, Nanao said softly as everyone in the room began to have side conversations about this matter, until Ranjika brought attention back to the game. Will you tell us who Captain Unohana? The conversation slowly died down so everyone could hear Unohana's answer. I believe the dare was only to tell you if I did have a crush. There was no mention of specifying who it was. Sorry Ranjaku, the room was filled with awe at the refusal to say who it was, as all the men in the room wondered if it was them. Well, it's my turn. Ichigo, truth or dare? Dare. Ichigo's mind immediately shot back to what Unohana said about the invasion of the Soul Society, and felt he made a wrong move. Ichigo, I dare you to make out with every girl in the room. Starting with Nimi, she gave him her trademark smile as his face seemed to lose all color. Lucky bastard, Shunsui scoffed. All the men in the room seemed to share his sentiments, as groans of frustration were all that came from them over the next 10 minutes. The women lined up in single file behind Nimue and took their 30-second turns to make out with the new captain. When Ichigo finished making out with Nanao, who was last in line, he was out of breath and exhausted. Is that all of you? He asked as he fixed his hair, his uniform, and wiped the tick from his mouth. Not quite, I'm last in line. Unohana walked up to Ichigo and sat on his lap. She eased into the moving her slowly against his, and soon after, started to lick them with her tongue. Ichigo followed her lead for the remaining 20 seconds and felt that this makeout was lasting longer than any of the other ones. Time's up, Soifin said in between gags from her most recent makeout session. Even though time had been called, Ichigo and Retsu were still going. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, they didn't break until everyone shouted time. Unohana pulled her from his and stood back up. It's your turn, Ichigo, she called back to him to continue the game. Okay, I'm Yoruichi, truth or dare? The goddess of Flash laughed when he called her name. I'm choosing dare, bring it on, Ichigo. She gave a competitive smirk to Ichigo as he readied his dare. I dare you to strip. The room was filled with cheers from the male players. Ichigo was patted on the back by Ikaku, who arrived during Ichigo's makeout dare. Yoruichi sighed. Well, if you insist. There was a puff of smoke and all that remained were Yoruichi's clothes. She turned into her cat form. And now the cat form exited from the clothes and another puff of smoke appeared and Yoruichi stepped out in her birthday suit. Oh my god! Soifin exclaimed as she fainted, blood rushing from her nose. Ichigo, you are amazing! Ikaku said, his mouth gaping. This was easy, Ichigo's seen it a million times, especially during that game of tag. Yoruichi winked at Ichigo once again, turning his face red. Will you shut up about that game? Now it's your turn, just go. Ichigo crossed his arms, and was shocked when she pointed back at him. Ichigo, truth or dare? Everyone was still looking at her, and seeing as she was nude it made a sense. I choose dare, Ichigo growled through his teeth. He pretty much knew what he was going to be dared to do. I dare you to play tag with me, Soifin, and Retsu tomorrow afternoon. Ichigo slapped his forehead over and over again, while whispering obscenities under his breath. Damn it all to hell, he glared at her maliciously, and that made Yoruichi one happy woman right about now. I hate you, but fine, what time? We play at midnight tomorrow night, so don't be late. Yoruichi sat back down in her seat and crossed her legs. Fine, well, it's my turn. Byakuya, truth or dare? He looked over to Byakuya, who was still sitting calmly in the far corner of the circle. I choose dare, do your worst, Kurosaki. He opened his eyes to look at Ichigo. I dare you to accept Rukia's challenge to a duel. Ichigo stood up and locked eyes with Byakuya, who also stood up. Now, you two, this is a non-violent game. Settle down. Yukitake spoke for the first time in the game. Kurosaki would be a fool to attack me, but I accept this dare. But know this, just because her last name is Kuchiki doesn't mean I will go easy on her. Now if you'll excuse me, I have no more patience for this meaningless game. Byakuya walked out of the office and closed the door behind him. I think I'll go too. I've got a patrol to finish. Ichigo was pissed by Byakuya's reaction to his dare, even though he got what he wanted, and Rukia would have her duel. Well, since Byakuya's not taking his turn, Lisa spoke up. So Ichigo, I dare you to whip it out for all us girls to see. I have patrol to fancy. Ichigo lunged out of the door and slammed it shut. Okay, well, Shunsui piped up. I dare you to join Yoruichi in being in nothing but your birthday suit. Lisa-chan, he received a death galra for this. Well, fine, since this is truth or dare. Lisa slowly reached down and pulled her shirt and bra off in one swift motion, revealing her braids to everyone in the room. While whistles and cheers filled the room, she pulled her skirt down to her ankles and her panites soon followed. This is a dream come true. Shunsui's tone sounded dreamier than a fangirl as he closed in on his former lieutenant. Just as his hand was about to finally graze her bare, the feeling of a sudden stop hit Shunsui in slow motion, following the superkick she gave him to stop his hormonally charged attempt to grope her. How cruel, he gasped as his face hit the floor and the room fell silent. My Lisa, you have quite the boss, Yoruichi bluntly shouted, pushing up her own and looking back at Lisa. They might even be as big as mine. I wouldn't go saying that. Lisa covered her with her left arm and her crotch with her right hand, and HSE slowly shrank back to her seat. The eyes of the men were starting to get to her. Nimue, truth or dare? Everyone's eye turned to the 12th Division's lieutenant, who had been sent by her father to gather information on human interaction. I'll choose the dare option. Her soft voice was barely above a whisper, but it was enough for Lisa to hear. I dare you to grope Soifin until she wakes up. Nimue stood up and walked over to the unconscious captain. She knelt down and pressed her hand into Soifin's shirt. She spun her finger around Soifin's left a few times, it enough to be seen from outside the shirt. She repeated this for the right. As Nimue worked her hands lower, Soifin began to stir. Yorichi. She moaned as she opened her eyes and was met with Nimue's expressionless face. Get off me, Lieutenant! Soifin kicked Nimue in the, sending her sliding across the floor on her butt until she stopped at the wall. Have a good time, Soifin? Yorichi giggled, then turned to Nimue. Good job completing that dare, Nimue. You're awesome. Nimue smiled appreciatively towards the nude goddess of Flash. Well, I'm going to call it a night. I'm trying to finish my paperwork before the Kichiki duel, Yukitake said with a big yawn. Everyone in the room seemed to share his sentiments as the game began to die down a little after Ichigo left. Everyone walked out of the 8th Division office, until only Lisa and Yorichi remained. I never knew Ichigo was such a good, Lisa said dreamily as she pulled her panites back up to her waist. She was so caught up in her memory of her makeout session with her new captain, that she didn't notice her hand remained at her crotch after she pulled her skirt back up. Lisa, you're sounding like you're crushing on Ichigo. Yorichi pulled her pants up and fastened her belt. Am I right? A little, I mean, he's so athletic and muscular. I'd ride that any time. Lisa finished rehooking her bra and began to put her top back on. Well, you'll have to wait a long time, because Captain Unohana has her sights set on him. Once they both were fully dressed, they both exited the office. It was the morning of the duel and Rukia's eye had just opened. She sat up in her bed in the 5th Division's bed and rubbed her eyes to see clearly. Getting up, she noticed a note at her bedside. It was from Ichigo. Rukia, the entire 5th Division is behind you today in your duel against Byakuya. Nell and I will be waiting for you at the training grounds. Rukia smiled as she placed the note on her bed and put on her uniform. As she was doing so, she was running the memories of her brother fighting in the war with the Arrancar, how he destroyed the second sea of Minos that appeared with his Bankai. His Bankai, that's what Rukia would have to avoid, but knowing her brother, if he was pushed hard enough he would no doubt release it to end the duel. She grabbed Sodi no Shuriyuki and placed it on her waist, then exited her barracks. When she opened the door she was greeted by cheers from her fellow 5th Division members. She stood there in the doorway, taken aback by the ovation. She smiled as she took her first step on the walk to the grounds, taking in the cheers as her motivation. Never had she been so encouraged to do anything in her life. She began to walk faster as she got closer to the grounds. Once she arrived, there was a small aisle in the crowd around the training grounds that lead to the battlefield for this Kichiki duel. The training grounds was filled with an thunderous ovation from the side Rukia entered, which was filled with members of the 5th Division, and the other half was silent, being that it was where the 6th Division was going to watch the duel. Once she got down the field, Byakuya, Rinji, Ichigo, Nell and the captain commander were waiting there, with the rest of the captains behind him. Rukia Kichiki, you have arrived. Now we may discuss the rules for this duel. Yamamoto looked from Byakuya to Rukia and then continued. This is not a duel for the position of the 6th Division captain, so if Rukia Kichiki is the victor, she will remain in her current position as 3rd seat of the 5th Division. Secondly, this duel will continue until one of you cannot continue or dies. We hope it ends in the former, as you both are highly seated officers. Now, are there any objections from any captains that this duel should not happen? He looked to all the captains and none spoke up. Very well, once I give the okay, this duel shall begin. Yamamoto and the other captains Flash stepped out of the battlefield, leaving just Ichigo, Rukia, Nell, and Byakuya. Rukia, do your best, Ichigo said, placing a hand on her left shoulder. You can do it, Nell said, giving Rukia a soft hug before she and Ichigo Flash stepped and sonitoed away, leaving her alone with her brother. Rukia immediately placed a hand on the handle of her Zanpakuto, then looked at her brother, whose eyes were closed. Open your eyes, brother, she barked at him, her eyes filled with anger. Byakuya's eyes remained shut as he stood completely still, not letting her words affect him. Kichikis, prepare yourselves for battle. Yamamoto called from atop the crowd, you may begin. The cheers from the crowd were soon silenced by the ryatsu that came rushing out from Byakuya. His eyes opened on Yamamoto's signal and they were filled with intensity no one had ever seen from him. Winds of the north meet in the south. Clouds of the west destroy the east, hear my call. Hado 4 Byakurai. An enormous blast of white lightning came towards Rukia. The crowd behind her parted like the Red Sea as the blast got closer to the third seat. She flash-stepped out the way of the Kido blast, and reappeared to Byakuya's left, her sword drawn, and she charged in at her brother. How amateurish! Byakuya merely increased his Ryatsu and Rukia began to slow down in her charge, and Byakuya aimed a slash right for her shoulder, after he finally drew his Zanpakuto. I'll show you amateurish! Rukia blocked the slash and kicked Byakuya's left foot around the calf area and threw him off balance. As he stumbled, Rukia aimed a few stab attempts at his upper body, catching him on the final attempt at his left bicep. Byakuya jumped back and looked at his arm, the blood starting to seep through his haori. He then realized he gave Rukia an opening. March on to the south. Heido 31, Shikaho. The giant blast of red energy closed in on Byakuya, and once again the crowd of viewers parted to avoid the blast. Scatter, Senbenzakura with the command. Byakuya's blade started to disintegrate into a sea of pink petals. They began to cover the blast, but were overwhelmed, forcing Byakuya to flash step out of the way of the blast. The petals continued to fly around and began to pursue Rukia. Crap, she thought as she flash stepped out of the way as they crashed down to when she used to be. This is getting bad. Rukia doesn't have the speed to avoid that attack for long, Ichigo thought. But little did he or anyone know that Rukia had something up her sleeve. When she reappeared from her fifth flash step, she held her sword to the right of her head, feet firmly on the ground in her stance. Dance, Sodi no Shiryuki. Her Zanpakuto turned all white and shined in the sunlight. First dance, Sum no Mai. Tsukishiro, slashing her sword, a glowing white circle appeared around her. The petals of Senbenzakura began to close in on Rukia at an alarming pace. At the last moment, she dived out of the circle, leaving the petals floating inside it, and a giant pillar of ice rose from the ground, freezing the petals in place. She disarmed Byakuya. Both Rinji and Ichigo said in unison as the 5th Division members began to cheer their third seat. It was true. Byakuya was just standing there with a hilt while his blade was frozen in the pillar, which was still freezing as the cheers grew. A few of the captains began to talk amongst themselves at what was transpiring as Rukia charged in on Byakuya. Once in close quarters, it was all Rukia as she began slashing endlessly at her brother, catching him with a few of them. Byakuya tried to escape with a flash step, but Rukia was quickly on his tail, appearing with a slash each time. Second dance, Tsugi no Mai. Hakuran Rukia made 4 stripes of white energy in front of her face towards Byakuya, then a giant wave of ice and frost came rushing from him. Byakuya barely managed to get away, both his right arm and leg getting frozen in the process. Most of the captains believed that this success wouldn't last long, but Rukia continued to pursue her brother. With a violent roar, Rukia slashed her sword down at Byakuya, who to his credit used the ice encasing his arm to block her blade. Heido 4. Byakurai. The shot from Byakuya's left index finger went clear through Rukia's thigh. It caught her and everyone else off guard. A smirk crossed Byakuya's face after killing all the momentum Rukia just amounted, and it was about to snowball. It's time to show you the gap between our strengths, and why you should not be a third seat, little sister. The ice pillar began to rumble and the petals of Senbenzakura flew back to its master, and freed his arm and leg from its icy prison, then reformed itself on the hilt in Byakuya's hand. Bankai. Byakuya dropped his sword, blade first, to the ground. Rukia watched it sink into the ground, and what seemed like millions of pink swords appeared all around them in a funnel. Senbenzakura Kageyoshi, Sake. This is when I abandon all defenses and focus on defeating my opponent. It has only been seen by 2 other people, your captain, Ichigo Kurosaki, and our grandfather Genrei Kichiki. These blades will not all come at you at once, so do no fret. A blade flew down to Byakuya's hand and he charged at Rukia. A loud clang could be heard from outside the Sake, the crowd being blocked by the large mass of blades from Byakuya's Bankai. What is this? Rinji asked Ichigo, looking back from the Sake to him. It's an ability of Byakuya's Bankai. It's an all-out attack. Basically, if Rukia is really as good as we think she is, she'll have to be better than Byakuya. Inside the Sake, Rukia was being overpowered by her brother's offense. The injury to her leg wasn't helping in the least bit either. After a few strikes, she was knocked onto her back and rolled a few feet to escape a stab attempt from her brother. I've got to push him back, she thought, then flash-stepped into the air. She aimed Heido 31 at him from above, but after she fired it, he wasn't there. Looking for me? His voice hit her ear, and at the same time his sword blade punched right through her left shoulder, making her arm go limp. Another blade came to his hand and he quickly slashed her back, sending her crashing into the ground. I hope you have seen the gap between our powers. Heido 4. Byakuya shot the blast through her other thigh, forcing her to her knees. Her pants were nearly all red from the blood she was losing and her Ryatsu was fading. You've fought valiantly, But you are not ready for your position. Stay down and accept this. Byakuya snapped his fingers and the Senkei blades began to disappear, the crowd coming back into view with gasps at Rukia's current condition. Rukia! Ichigo shouted to her from the crowd, shocked to see how fast the fight had gone south for her. Byakuya gave her one last look and turned to walk away, but a soft sound from her direction caught his attention and he looked back to her. Carriage of Thunder. She began, bridge of a spinning wheel. Byakuya's eyes widened when he realized what spell she was preparing. Hado 4. Byakuya tried to get his spell of in time, but he was too late. With light, divide this into 6. Bakudo 61, Rikujikoro. 6 beams of light appeared and collided with Byakuya's waist on all sides, immobilizing him. You will accept this, brother. Rukia pushed herself up using her Zanpakudo. I can take care of myself. I am strong, physically and mentally, and if I have to defeat you to prove it, then I will. Third dance, San no Mai Shirifune. Her blade quickly turned to ice and shined in the sun. The crowd was silent, seeing that the fight would come down to this. Prepare to be defeated. 6th Division Captain Byakuya Kuchiki. Rukia poured her remaining Ryatsu into her ice blade and charged at her brother for the final time. He was immobilized by her Bakudo 61 spell and could only watch as she closed in on him. Step by step Rukia envisioned herself stabbing right through Byakuya's, the blow that would win her the duel. Her legs were killing her, but she mustered all the resolve she could to ignore the pain sucked to defeat Byakuya. Everyone watching was silent as she got closer and closer to him. With one last yell she thrust her blade at his. Blood splattered on Byakuya's face. His eye met Rukia's, the anger in his eyes pushing into her eyes. Rukia's spell faded before she arrived to deliver the final blow to him, and he caught her blade. Byakuya raised his blade to deliver his final blow. Hado 4 Byakurai. Rukia fired her spell through his right shoulder, rendering it useless, much to the surprise of the crowd. Senbonzakura hit the ground with a series of clangs after Byakuya's arm fell. Hado 4 Byakurai. She fired another shot through his left shoulder, making his free arm go limp as well. I'm not ready, huh? She panted. Then eat this. Rukia began to her right, and her last-ditch slash grazed Byakuya's left forearm as she hit the ground with a resounding thud. The 6th Division began to roar with excitement, until ice began to creep up Byakuya's left arm until he was completely encased in ice. It's a tie, Ichigo whispered, letting the breath he held for the last part of the fight out. I declare this duel a draw, the head captain announced, as the 5th Division cheered with the result. Their third seed taking the captain of the 6th Division to the brink, and tying him was the most impressive thing that and in the Soul Society than Ichigo's campaign to save her. Unohana was the first one down to the scene of the fight. She attended to Rukia while Isane and a few other 4th Division members began to defrost Byakuya. How is she? Ichigo asked Unohana after he flash-stepped to her side. She's exhausted and unconscious, but she will be fine. Unohana started to heal the wounds to both her legs. Ichigo smiled, knowing that he was right about her abilities and that she took her brother down to the last blow, and tied not lost. You were great, Rukia, simply great, he whispered. The next day, where am I? Rukia thought to herself as her eyes cracked open and adjusted to the light. She was inside, that much she could tell, and she felt a lot of pain coming from her legs as she moved every appendage at finger to make sure she was still alive. Then it hit her. She remembered the ending of her battle with Byakuya. She exhausted the last of her energy on those last 2 Kido blasts. How could she have been so stupid to have the perfect opening and not finish? Her door opened and she tilted her head up to see it was Ichigo, carrying an enormous basket filled with candies and flowers, even a teddy bear. Oh, Rukia, you're awake, he blurted out before she could close her eyes and pretend to still be unconscious. I got you this. Yukitake had one of these stashed away for some reason and said I could give it to you, he said, examining the basket as if he'd seen it for the first time. It's wonderful. Ichigo, where's Rinji? She asked, noticing her bedside was vacant. Oh, he passed out about half an hour ago. He's in the other room sleeping. He stayed up all night beside you. Ichigo placed the basket in her lap gently, remembering the damage done to her legs. You didn't have to get me that. I don't deserve it. She looked to the side as she let shame take over. She didn't even think she could look Ichigo in the eyes after losing a duel she made the challenge for. What are you talking about? Of course you do. A loser like me doesn't deserve to be worried over. She shot back at him, still not looking at him. Suddenly her head shot back, from the impact of a teddy bear blindsiding her. You idiot. As soon as you passed out you encased your brother in a block of ice. The head captain ruled it a draw. That was yesterday. Unohana healed you and said you needed a night's rest. You tied, you didn't lose. What Ichigo said hit Rukia like a ton of bricks. She tied her brother with her Zanpakudo's third dance ability, freezing anything it pierces. The same way she defeated the 9th Espada. I tied my brother. Tears began to stream down her face as joy pushed shame out of the way and took over. Rukia grabbed the teddy bear and hugged it tightly. You did it, Rukia. You proved to everyone here that you can defend yourself and even hold your own against the captain. I'm proud of you, Rukia. He walked up to her and placed a congratulatory hand on her shoulder. Well, I've got paperwork to do, so I'll see you when you get out of here. He left Rukia to enjoy the basket he brought her and walked towards the exit of the 4th Division. Before he could reach the door, his vision went black and a soft feeling covered his face. Guess who? A voice called from behind him, and it could only be one person. A unohana? His vision returned to him, and once he turned he was greeted by the captain of the 4th Division. Your 3rd seat should be able to leave around this evening. Rukia is very lucky that she's so skilled, or she'd be in a much worse condition. She was holding a clipboard when she said this and marked off the recovered box. I'm glad. She really did look to be in a bad shape, but I'm glad she's fine. He looked back to Retsu, who now placed the clipboard on a nearby counter, and noticed they were alone. Ichigo, how would you like to join me for some tea later on? She could feel her knees start to shake just a little as she awaited his answer, and noticed the redness creeping across his face. Sure, I'll join you for some tea. What time? 7. The tea will be ready at 7, she said quickly, smiling at his acceptance of her invitation. I'll be waiting in my quarters for you. The hours seemed to pass like days for Unohana afterwards. When she arrived back at her quarters, she removed her haori, folded it neatly and placed it on her bed, before she put the teapot on the stove to begin heating it for her and Ichigo. She started her grooming ritual to make sure her hair was nice, her clothes weren't wrinkled. She walked into her bathroom and splashed some water on her face. Afterwards she began undoing her long braided hair. Once she finished, her luscious raven-colored hair fell down to her lower back. She looked at the clock. It was 6:30. She walked into her kitchen area and set the pot of tea on the stove so that it would be ready once Ichigo arrived. At 7 o'clock sharp, a knock was heard on Unohana's door. Good evening, Ichigo. Come in. He walked in past her and looked around her room. The tea is ready. I hope you like jasmine tea. She closed the door behind him and smirked. She sat at the table that was on the same wall as her bed and poured herself a cup and then poured Ichigo his own. You know, I'm not much of a tea drinker, Ichigo stated in between sips. But his tea is wonderful. He continued to drink the delicious jasmine tea, not knowing what this night would hold for him if Unohana had her way. So how has your first week of being captain treated you, Ichigo? Unohana asked, setting her cup down on its saucer. Well, the paperwork is a killer, but it's fun so far, especially after Rukia put Byakuya in his place. He's so smug and thinks he's the best thing to come around here. Pisses me off. His Ryatsu began to boil at the thought of Byakuya's attitude, but regained control of it so he wouldn't disturb this nice evening. There's that fire again. Resta's eyes narrowed in excitement from feeling his soul reaper Ryatsu around her. Lit a fire inside Retsu that she hadn't felt for centuries. She was even beginning to lose control of herself. When did you and Byakuya become so aggressive towards one another? Unohana poured him another cup of jasmine tea. Well, it was when Rukia first disappeared, when I had her powers. He reminisced back to the days when he didn't even know his sword could have a name. He and Rinji came to take Rukia back to the Soul Society, and they attacked Yuryu. I got there just after Rinji defeated him and almost lost, but suddenly I felt stronger, fast, and felt no pain. I almost killed Rinji when Byakuya stepped in and stole my powers. He said he was going to take Rukia back and kill her, and I couldn't let that happen. When we invaded the Seriidii, he continued to get in my way, until the execution date, when I achieved Bankai just to defeat him. It was nice to knock him down a peg. Ichigo pumped his fist slightly in celebration, all the while not noticing Unohana staring at him the whole time. The two captains talked for hours about any and everything. Unohana would tell Ichigo some embarrassing things about captains when they were younger, like how Shunsui once got so drunk he called head captain Yamamoto Mami, and the time when Soifun was once late for a meeting building her shrine to Yorichi. Wow, I've got to see this shrine. Ichigo laughed after his 5th cup of tea. I'm sure I could put Yuichiro up to task so she can show you. She has a certain knack for entering places that people want to keep secret. They both continued to laugh until a knock came from the door. Unohana placed her cup down and walked over to the door. Once she opened it and saw her nightly guest. Hello, Captain. Isane looked down in embarrassment of her nightly nightmares. Come in, Isane. Unohana motioned her inside. Accepting the invitation, she walked in and stood in the middle of the room. Captain Kurosaki? Isane jumped, seeing Ichigo sitting at the table. What are you doing here? She backed away slowly, until she bumped into Unohana. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, I'll go. Stay, Isane. That was all she needed. Isane sat down on Unohana's bed, silently. So, what was the dream about tonight? Unohana pulled a cup from her cabinet and poured Isane some tea. Well, I was talking to Ichigo, and the out of nowhere Renji came up and started fighting her, and then when I tried to stop them they both made fun of my height, and then a fish cake appeared and Renji ate it. And that woke me up. Isane looked down in shame at her embarrassing nightmare, and a small chuckle that came from Ichigo made it even worse. Why are you laughing? Isane's face turned slightly red as she glared at the new captain. I'm sorry, but imagining Renji yelling at you and eating a fish cake sounds funny. Ichigo calmed himself down. Sorry for laughing at your nightmare, Isane. Ichigo took another sip of tea and stood up. I had a good time tonight, Retsu, but I've got paperwork to finish and I bet Rukia and Nell left me a big pile. He walked towards the door, until he felt a hand on his shoulder. When will I have the pleasure of your company again, Ichigo? Unohana gave Ichigo a gentle smile. When's the next captain's meeting again? Ichigo looked up as he tried to remember the date for the next meeting. It's 3 days from now. Unohana turned back to Isane. I wonder what you'll do next, Captain Kurosaki. Giving him one last smile, she slowly closed the door behind her. Ichigo was at a loss as to what she meant by her last remark, but before he could begin to think, he felt a slight tickle southeast of him. The feeling got stronger faster than Ichigo realized and remembered where he felt it last. Nell, Ichigo thought. He stepped in her direction as fast as he could until he finally reached her. She had drawn her Zanpakuto, and for good reason. Byakuya Kichiki was standing in front of her, and behind Nell was Rukia. You leave Rukia alone! Gamuza was pointed at Byakuya's throat, but he hadn't drawn his Zanpakuto nor looked as if he was going to attack Rukia. I'll tell you this once, Arankar, move or else I'll teach you how much of a mistake it was to point your sword at me. Just as Byakuya's arm twitched, Ichigo slapped his hand onto his right shoulder. I don't believe you have the right to threaten my lieutenant. Byakuya. The glares they shot at the other was accompanied by the most fierce Ryatsa the other could manage. Both of you stop. Everyone turned to look at Rukia, who issued the order. Big brother, what is it that you want? She stepped up to her brother. I came here to congratulate you for your efforts in our duel. You have shown me that you are capable of fighting the strongest of opponents. I approve of your promotion to 3rd seat of the 5th division. He gave Rukia a small smile which caused tears to form in her eyes and stream down her face. Thank you, big brother. Rukia wiped away her tears and smiled at her big brother. I'll see you at the captain's meeting. Kurosaki. Byakuya disappeared after his remark, leaving Ichigo glaring at where he used to be. That smug little bitch. I can't stand him. Ichigo crossed his arms in frustration as he walked back towards the 5th Division barracks and his room. Ichigo, watch how you talk about my brother. Rukia called after him as she and Nell followed behind him. Well, since you care about him so much, you're doing my paperwork when we get back to the barracks, and that's an order. Ichigo stuck his tongue out at his 3rd seat in victory. Damn you, Ichigo! She jumped up and slapped him in the face. Ouch, you midget! Ichigo palmed her face and pulled his wizard mask over his face and looked towards the barracks. Ichigo, what are you doing? Rukia tried to free herself from Ichigo's grip, but it was futile as he had his arm back like a quarterback. Meet you at the barracks, Rukia. Nell, go long. Ichigo threw Rukia as hard as he could towards the 5th division in a rainbow-like arc. Yay, playtime! Neilio cried out in joy as she disappeared using a sonido. She reappeared outside the door of the office and saw Rukia descending face first towards her. With a loud thud, Rukia collided with Neilio. That was fun! Again. She hugged Rukia tightly, drawing a cry of pain from the 3rd seat. Nell pulled Rukia to her feet, and the two went inside the office to finish the day's paperwork. Once Nell opened the door, she let out the biggest squeal anyone ever heard from her. Even Ichigo heard it from where he was. Once again he stepped in the direction of Nell and came upon the scene, seeing Nell and Rukia standing at the door with looks of shock on their face. What's the problem? Ichigo now sported the same look of shock that Rukia and Nell shared. Hello, Captain Kurosaki. Ichigo's eyes with hers, and there it was again. The rain, the girl by the river, the lifeless body lying on top of him. Ichigo took a step towards her, and he felt like a kid again. He could feel himself gravitating towards her, feeling that warmth he hadn't felt for 9 long years. Mom! He fell into arms, tears gushing from his eyes. His mother, Masaki Kurosaki, who was killed by the Grand Fisher Hollow, was now right in front of him. Excuse me, Captain, but why did you just call me Mom? Her words made Ichigo feel as if someone shoved his zangetsu down his throat. She didn't remember him. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Freshman 19 for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.